All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, Charlie. So here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Charlie Petrizzo. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you, Guy. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So Charlie was born and raised in Staten Island, New York. And as a young adult, he moved to Old Bridge and later Millstone, New Jersey. His story of surviving 2 tragic accidents, including the major brain trauma of a car accident and a, quote, electrocution, in which he burned over 2/3 of his body, became the focus of the 2012 award-winning docu-drama called Charlie's Scars. The inspiration for the founding of Project to Heal came in part from his recognition of the care he needed and received from his parents during and after his 2 trials from the accidents, but also from the recognition of how many friends offered to help his family during that time. Charlie, welcome to the podcast.
Great. Hey, thanks, Guy. I'm glad to be here. Can't wait to talk with you and tell my story. And
so, fellow New Yorker.
Yes. New Yorker. Where are you from? What part?
I was born in Manhattan, raised in Queens, lived in Jersey.
Yep.
And I just love it when I get someone who's from New York on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm from Staten Island, which is kind of the forgotten borough. You know, we were always forgotten. I mean, Manhattan is when people think of the city, right? What do you think of? You think of Manhattan, right?
Right.
So I grew up in kind of the suburb of Manhattan, if you will, but I loved it. Being a New York City boy and being one of 3 boys and a father who was a sports kind of nut, I fell in love with sports, especially football, baseball, and hockey. Still remain a big New York Mets fan. Now that I'm in the Carolinas, I've kind of my allegiance to the hockey team I follow changed a little, but I still follow New York sports. I still have that New York Rangers hat in the back of my closet, even though I follow the Carolina Hurricanes hockey team now.
Awesome. I'm going to
love it here, and I don't think we would have been able to do what we're doing down here in the Carolinas if we had stayed up there in the city.
Yeah. Well, look, let's start off here. Well, what the heck happened?
Okay. So, it's funny because when my mom and dad would used to talk about me, I'm the middle child. So they say, something about the middle child. And so my mom always used to tell me, when you were born, you came out breech and the umbilical cord was wrapped around your neck and you were purple. Oh. And so, to me, that was I'm like, wow, I was a problem right from the start. I was a challenge right from the start. Even to myself, I was a challenge. So, I lived a very normal life with 2 loving parents and 2 brothers, one a little bit older and one a little bit younger. And my first accident, I call them accidents, happened when I was just about 5 years old, just turning 5 years old. And it was a day where we were home. We lived in an apartment building, and my godmother and her 2 young sons, who were about my age, came over to eat lunch with us. And when they went to leave, I had a tantrum and wanted to go home with them. They only lived 5 minutes away. I wanted to continue playing ball with my 2 friends there. And so after I wore my mom out, and she said, all right, go. And so I went, and we were playing with a wiffle ball, a plastic ball, against the garage. And my aunt was sitting there right on what we call the stoop in New York and watching us. And one of my friends hit the ball over, his brother who was pitching the ball. And I was standing about 10 feet behind him. and I chased the ball into the street, and I wasn't looking. And there was a car parked, and there was a car coming down the road. I ran out, and it just nailed me right in the head. I mean, it was probably going 40 miles an hour or so. I was a small little guy, and it just threw me like a rag doll. Now, this was many, many years ago. I'm 59 now. So at the time, the policeman who came, they made a decision that if they didn't wrap me up and get me to the hospital, I wasn't going to make it because my head was split open and I was bleeding all over the place. Fortunately, there was a hospital that was about 5 minutes away. They got me there. They stabilized me. They had to fly in a neurosurgeon who, from what I understand, was playing poker up in the Poconos with his buddies that day. And so they got a helicopter and got him in, and he immediately performed neurosurgery on me. I remained in the hospital for, about a month. I was paralyzed on the left side of my body. It was, the right side of my brain took the trauma. And so the left side of my body was paralyzed. And so here I was now, after coming home from the hospital, a kid who had no issues. And when you're just about 5 years old, you're really starting to come into your own coordination at some level. And here I was now, I was a lefty, and everything I knew how to do was gone. I couldn't move my hand, couldn't move my leg. So I had to relearn everything righty, and it wasn't easy. I mean, there's stories of my father told me stories of him coming home from work, like some of the exercises my mom had to do with me because they were pretty sure. And now we know that there's something we know about neuroplasticity in the brain. But, now there's people who think and I think there's some strong evidence to the fact that there's neurogenesis where neurons can actually rebuild themselves. And they believe such is the case, especially for much younger people who are injured. And that's what my neurologist really thought would happen with me, because it took 1.5 years to 2 years, but I regained my function in my left side of my body. Now, not having it 2 years, I started to become more inclined to do everything from the right side because that's what I had done for the past. And I never regained the coordination I had, even as a younger child, that my father told me. My father was a really good athlete and a really good, what would you call it? Like if he were a scout, a baseball scout, he knew how to pick out talent. And I had an older brother who was really good in sports, went on to, play college football and was an all-star and everything. And my dad would say to me, you were a lefty. And at 1.5 years younger than him, you were doing things that, at 4 years old, you were doing things that I seen 8 and 9-year-olds doing with the ball.
Wow.
But when you got hurt, you just never got it back, that lefty. So you started doing everything the other way. And so, I guess in some ways it was a loss for me. I mean, I never really realized my potential. I still continued to play and compete in sports because my brothers did, and I liked it. But I was, average at best. But I loved doing it. But I also developed a sense for something that I thought I could do better or had more of a passion for, given, where I was. And I just had this overwhelming love for animals, most especially dogs, horses. I had my second experience when I was 16, and this could have been prevented. I mean, I was working a summer job for a neighborhood contractor, and I was trying to get myself in shape, build up some muscle. Like I said, I was still playing sports, but I wasn't, I was a guy that sat on the bench and was called in when the second team needed to come in. So I was trying to build myself up for sophomore year, muscle-wise. So I was doing labor, picking things up, throwing trash away at big sites. But he had a job for us to do, our boss, and it was to paint a house in New York City. And he picked me up that morning and he said, "Hey, Charlie, does your dad have a ladder in the garage?" I said, "Yeah, he's got one." He said, "Is it a wooden ladder?" I said, "Yeah." So I brought it out. And it was about a 20-foot ladder, guy. I brought it out and the guy says, "Nah, that's not going to be long enough. We'll use this aluminum one we have here in the truck." I said, "Okay." So we went to the job, and the job site was a house that was on a main road in Staten Island, but it was very commercial, a lot of traffic. Houses were very close to the street. And we had to pick the ladder up and face it toward the house. And it needed to be turned to get it so that we could lay it against the house. And we extended it because the peak of that, it was one of those very old houses. And it had a really high peak, almost like a third floor attic that we had to get the house up over the window. And so when we went to turn the ladder, it was a bit unwieldy. And we were 3 feet away from telephone poles. So at 16 years old, all I thought about was, this is, okay, those wires up there, telephone poles, telephone wires, we're safe. And I didn't even think, I'm like, it doesn't matter because we're not, we're just going to turn this ladder and put it against the house. But when we went to turn the ladder, it was extended so high that it was, like I said, unwieldy and heavy. And they have these rubber boots on them, these ladders, to stabilize them. And the one on the right-hand side, which was the side where the poles were, snapped. And the ladder lost a couple inches and leaned when it snapped. And I had me and another guy on the other side stabilizing the ladder, but it pulled me and it hit the wires. And they were current 36,000 volts of electricity, which my father's a power engineer. And he said, by their standards, that's medium voltage. By my standards, 36,000 volts, hitting your body isn't supposed to happen. So my hands are on the ladder. And when that electricity ran through the ladder and hit my hands and my body, it just felt like my eyeballs were sucked out of my face.
Wow.
And like pulled out and snapped back in, and then I was gone. And I was just laying there for dead. Pulse barely, breathing barely. Guy across the street eating at McDonald's saw what happened. He happened to be a EMT. He jumped up. Now, the road he had to cross was a major road, and there were cars coming back and forth, and he saw me go down. So he's like, what am I going to do here? He saw me stuck to the ladder. He said I was glowing, green, red. My God. I was glowing. He said there was a glow about me, like the Hulk changing in the old show. And he thought to himself, all right, he's attached to that ladder because the electricity's got him stuck to it. I need to run across the street and almost tackle him to unhook that electric connection. He said as he started to run across the street, there must have been a transformer that overloaded, and I fell off the ladder and hit the ground. When he got there, he immediately started putting his hands over my body, and he felt, the temperature coming off me. And he said, thankfully we had been using a hose to clean off some paint and stuff, and he used the hose to cool the bottom of me where my shoes were still on and my pants were still on. He checked my pulse, and somebody had called the emergency, and he said, like, before he knew it, he could hear the sirens, and they were there so quick. And they were doing what paramedics do, and they got me in the ambulance, and they got me to a close hospital where they couldn't treat my burns. And so all they could do was stabilize me. And so coming from New York City, you would understand this. What they did was they were going to fly a helicopter into Staten Island and fly me out to Cornell Burn Center in New York City up on York and 63rd. But they didn't have anywhere to fly a helicopter and land it on the hospital in Staten Island. So they had to fly the helicopter to an airfield, take me there by ambulance, then get me up in the helicopter. And they said, no, it's going to take too long. So what they did was they called ahead. They closed the Verrazano Bridge. They closed the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And they closed the FDR.
Wow.
And they threw me in an ambulance. And I swear, guy, we must have got, from what they tell me, I was out. They told me that they got to York and 63rd from Staten Island in about 10 minutes. There were police cars ahead of the ambulance, police cars behind the ambulance.
Oh, my God.
And we made it in 10 minutes, where there were 2 burn doctors standing by to take care of me. And unfortunately, what they found was that what they saw weren't necessarily superficial burns that they thought were superficial burns, but that they went deep into my body and badly burned masses of muscles that I had to have lose.
Wow.
And
So let me ask you a question here. So were these burns ones that are normally associated with like a fire? I mean, if we were to look at you, did you look burned like that?
Yeah. The only thing I'd say is that, I mean, if you look at my burn, so to give your audience a perspective, my left side is gone from about 2 inches to the left of my belly button to my spine in the back. My hip is gone. The top of your hip kind of comes up and crests. All of that was burned and is shaved down to a nub.
Oh.
So I'm missing everything from about 2 inches to the left of my belly button, then down into my hip, and everything just to about the spine and the back on my left side. So if you looked at me, you could look at me and say, it looks like a shark took a bite out of me.
Wow.
Like a big, and then the other scars, like there's one on my head here that you can see, because it blew out my head. The electricity came in my hands and in my feet and blew out my head.
Jesus.
It came in my side too. The way it came in my side was that when the electricity hit me, my body jarred and turned to the left and stuck to the rung. And it seared me like a hamburger, it looked like. But when they got in there, they're like, no, this is more than superficial. And actually, when we were interviewing one of the doctors for Charlie Scars, he said that we kept digging and digging, and we got right up to the stomach lining. And we knew that if the stomach lining was breached, we had to intubate him, and the chance of him making it was probably slim. And so fortunately for me, it didn't hit the stomach lining. So they could feed me normally. But I was in that hospital. I was in intensive care for like 6 weeks. First time I had like 6 major surgeries, skin grafts. Then spent the next couple summers in the hospital trying to have repairs done to the burns on my head to try to make it look a little bit more cosmetically pleasing for me, because I was 16 years old. I was burned all over my body. 16 years old, vanity is everything.
Yeah.
And I just was, I think about myself now, like as a 16-year-old, oh my God, believe me, there's no mirrors in a burn unit for a reason. Especially when a 16-year-old is there and he's going to look at himself in the mirror and say, holy, but I didn't need to see mirrors to know what was wrong with me and what I would look like. I just looked down at my side and my whole body was burned superficially from the top of my chest to my waist, and then down the back of my legs all the way to my feet and up the back. I had all splash burns and a couple 3rd-degree burns on my arms, back, and shoulder, and then a little bit down my left arm. But I had big holes in my hands. I mean, the electricity blew holes in my hand that you could see through, my dad said. You could see through your hand. Kind of like Jesus with the nails. He said you could see through your hands.
All right, Charlie, let me interject here for a second. Let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Charlie Petrizzo, the founder of Project to Heal. All right, let's just pause here for a second to thank our sponsors. All right, we are back. So how did Project to Heal? Well, first of all, this the 2012 docu-drama called Charlie Scars. How did that come about?
So my wife, in 2003, I had moved our family down here to take a very important role within a financial institution, and I was doing very well. Took over national sales manager job and was running marketing and product development inside of the insurance group at one of the largest in the country, and that's why I moved down here. In 2003, it started having now it wasn't performance related, but there were some challenges at work, and my wife's father got cancer, lung cancer. And we had been down there 2 years, and she couldn't be up there to help her mother. And I started taking on this. I felt, this is my fault. I moved us down here for this job, and now she can't be. And then my mother took ill. And now I couldn't be. And so my wife's father died a month after getting sick. Mm. And she couldn't be up there to help her mother. So I was just beating myself up about that. And then my mother got sick, and I couldn't be up there to help my two brothers with that. And so I went into a real bad depression. I ended up leaving the financial services industry. But when I finally started to recognize that I wanted, that if I look back at my life and all the people that helped me, and my mother passed on about a year after my father-in-law, and I realized how much she and so many others did for me through those two accidents, and how many friends and family helped her. And I was like, I want to kind of be like my mother. I always wanted to be like my father. Very, very successful professionally, very successful, top of the industry. And I was making that move, and I was running the top bank insurance program, annuity program in the country. So in many respects, I had achieved that. And so I started feeling, after this loss of my mother, who took care of me, and my father-in-law, and just my wife in general, the person she is, a person of deep faith. I was a person of no faith. I called myself a Catholic, but, and I wanted to lead a life of more intentional service to other people because of the people who served me. And I also knew that I had this love for these dogs, but I just didn't know what to do with that love for dogs. And I read this article, and it said that the service dog industry, most organizations don't have a breeding program. And the challenge for them is that they have to go to shelters to find dogs to train. And a longitudinal study conducted on that very subject, the success of shelter dogs in service dog training, found that only 1 out of 12, or 8.25% of the dogs in shelters, could successfully become service dogs. Led me to realize why it takes 3 years for someone to get a service dog. At least that's one of the challenges, right? So I said, all right, I love these dogs. They are the top dog used for service dog work, and unchallenged as to being the best breed for the work. So what if I, who love these dogs, could find a way to develop a lineage of dogs that became the prototypical candidate for service dog work, and just donated them for service dog organizations that didn't have, breeding programs. And that's what Project to Heal became. And today we serve over 25 organizations that, and they drive to North Carolina. Talk about, look, I don't want to toot my own horn, because everything that is good that has come to me is from above. I've just had the grace flow through me to kind of think about it and come to the realization that I'd be happiest doing this, and I'd also be serving others, which is what we're called to do through my faith. And so Project to Heal kind of became the thing for me.
What kind of dog are we talking about specifically?
Labrador Retrievers.
Labrador. And did you always have a particular affection for those specific dogs or dogs in general?
So let me share a story with you. When I was 11 years old, okay, my dad was allergic to dogs. And so we couldn't have a dog. Meanwhile, I told you from a very early age, after the sports, I loved animals. My dad was asked to take a job down in Atlanta. And so the gentleman who was running the office in Atlanta asked him to come down with his family and spend some time with his family. And we did. It was his boss who was actually up in New York who had moved down to Atlanta, but he was retiring. Mm-hmm. And so we went down there, and this guy had a black Labrador Retriever. And I got to spend 5 days with this dog named Molly. And I still have a picture of me in these two-tone leather, high-heel 1970-something shoes, my bell-bottoms, and this silk shirt with flowers bigger than me on it with a collar almost as big as me, hugging Molly. And I was 11 years old. And I said to my mom and dad, because they reminded me, you said to us, someday I'm going to breed these dogs. And it became, like it happened.
Wow.
And I didn't remember that until I started Project to Heal.
Wow. So Project to Heal, and that's project, the number 2, and then heal.org.
Yep.
What do you do?
So what we do, we specialize in expert husbandry of Labrador Retrievers. And essentially, I did some research, and I found who is arguably the top breeder of Labrador Retrievers in the country, if not the world, for the past 25 years or so. I went to meet her, told her what I wanted to do, and she agreed to sell me one of her girls from her foundation stock. Now, this lady had been breeding at the time for over 30 years, 250 champions to her name. She was an internationally acclaimed judge. So I knew I was getting my foundation stock from a top breeder in the world. Mm-hmm. And so she served as my mentor for a number of years. And then others who closer by here in North Carolina became friendly with me, and they helped me to learn pedigrees. And over the years, we've refined that by deciding which puppies from which lines are having the highest success. Now, the industry average, I think, for bred dogs by some of the highest, like Canine Companions for Independence is the largest service dog organization in the world. And I believe, and they breed about, it depends on the year, 600 to 800 puppies a year. But that's done through a very big volunteer network. And I've decided that I wanted to create a place where all the puppies are raised by people who that's all they do. They do it over and over again so that every process is homogenous. So with this puppy, we do A, B, and C, and a puppy 3 years down the road, we do A, B, and C for the same amount of time so that we can make sure that every puppy's getting the same thing in terms of nurturing and socialization. So it would mean that what we're leaving to chance, if they're all getting that same nurturing and socialization at the same levels, it would mean that it's the genetics that are making the difference, and I could focus more on refining the genetics. Mm-hmm. Now, what that's led to is our longest partner, Fidos for Freedom. They've been in business for 40 years, maybe. They have a 90% success rate with our dogs. 90%.
In placing them or training?
So as I said in the beginning, for organizations that use dogs from shelters, the latest abstract of a study found that dogs from shelters continue not to work. with still well over an 80% fail rate when they're put into the position of having to try to become a service dog. Over an 80% fail rate. Now think about the veteran who's got PTSD and is now waiting 4 years for a dog.
Right.
Because all these dogs are failing.
Yeah.
And then he goes and blows his brains out.
Yeah.
Purdue University did a study that found, now, first understand who Purdue University Vet School is. They're the leading authority on the human canine bond in the country. So they did a study back in, I think the first study was in 2018, and they took a group of veterans with a service dog and a group without service dogs. And what they found was the group that possessed or owned a service dog had lower levels of hypervigilance, night tremors, outbursts of anger, and waking cortisol levels. Those are the 4 major symptoms, Guy, that lead to suicidal ideation. But it's taken 4 years for these guys to get a service dog, when veterans or humans, civilians, are getting a heart transplant, or getting a liver, or getting, a lung, before these guys could get a service dog. And it's costing $25,000 to $40,000. So I said to myself, something's wrong here. Okay. And what I found was that if I can get puppies that have a very high level of success and then can donate them, just by my efforts, these organizations can lower their costs, because if you're making a widget and 90% of the widgets coming off your line are unsellable, you're going to be out of business real quick.
Right.
Okay,
Now let me hang on. Let me ask Charlie. So you're breeding these dogs, and you're giving them to people who train them.
The organizations we donate them to do the training. We breed. So the most important part of a dog's life is birth to 12 weeks. That is called the critical or sensitive phase. That is when these dogs go through the nurturing, socialization, and early obedience training that will affect them the rest of their lives. So it has to be done right. It has to be done on the proper time frame. It has to be done in the proper amounts, and it has to include the proper genetics. That's where we specialize.
Wow.
These organizations then take the dogs from us, okay? And all we hear is, oh my God, I can't believe this puppy does this, or I can't believe this puppy's not afraid of that. You've got this dog sitting and lying down and pulling a door open at 8 weeks. Yeah.
Where's Project to Heal located?
Wachovia, North Carolina, which is about 30 miles south of Charlotte. So it's a good area, a good part of the country, easy access in and out. And right now, so we started this organization when I found out that a lot of organizations, because they didn't have a breeding program, because starting a breeding program is so expensive, requires physical assets and an esoteric knowledge, we figured out that if we did this, we could help a lot of organizations that didn't have breeding programs. And now we even have organizations that do have breeding programs coming to us because their breeding programs maybe aren't producing enough dogs for them, and we'll fill the gap.
Right.
But there's a new challenge in the service dog industry, Guy. Since COVID, and I've talked to the president of Assistance Dogs International, which is a very large organization of service dog organizations, 80 some odd in the United States. And what I found from the president is that since COVID, a lot of these organizations are having challenges finding puppy raisers, which are the core of the service dog development, and keeping service dog trainers once they've trained them how to train service dog programs. So my first challenge was finding a way to help these organizations who don't have breeding programs by learning how to breed outstanding or prototypical pups for service dog works. That will always be a process in refinement to me until you chase that ever elusive 100%. You're never going to get 100% to succeed. And even if, that one organization that has 90%, they've been doing it so long and have so many experienced trainers, I think that's their success. So now what we need to do is figure out for our partner organizations, all right, if they can't find puppy raisers, who are the people that keep these puppies from 12 weeks, typically when we donate them to the organization, till they're about a year to 18 months old. Well, now they have another problem. They can't take in as many puppies to get ready to be put into the task training. So Project Heal is now, readying itself to fix that, or to try to address that problem by not only continuing to breed and donate puppies to the organizations, but now putting out what we call, or what we're going to trademark as Started for Service Dogs. Started for Service Dogs are Labrador Retrievers whose pedigrees have been used for over 15 years and have shown their ability to successfully become service dogs up to 90% of the time when placed in a service dog program. And we will now, if you have a dog wash out, which means a dog who can no longer make it through training, rather than giving you an 8-month-old puppy, you can come to our facility and look for a dog the same age that is guaranteed to finish training, because we've seen what that dog can do. You can take it home. Now you don't have to start a year earlier and spend another $5,000 to $7,000. And that veteran, by the way, who's waiting for that dog, doesn't have to wait another year.
Charlie, look, we've got to stop here. I'm listening to you and looking at you and just so friggin' inspired. I mean, come on. Really, your story is, for lack of a better word, crazy. I mean, just the accidents you've gone through, and how you've come back to that. And it's just so heartwarming to hear how this love for dogs have blossomed, and you're helping people, man. Come on. It's incredible.
Guy, I told you at the beginning of our interview that I wasn't a person of faith. I was what they would call a C&E Catholic. I'd go on Christmas and Easter because mom and dad said, you got to go to church. It was my wife during my depression who was a rock of faith. And one day she was getting my 2 young daughters ready to go to church. And I was laying on the couch in my funk of a depression, watching NFL Today or something. And she was yelling at my 5-year-old daughter, who could be a handful at the time, who's 28 now. Come on, we got to go to church. And there I was laying, and I jumped up off the couch. I said, give me 5 minutes. Let me be an example to my kids. And I went up, I showered, I got dressed real quick, and I said, let's go to mass. I was in the midst of a depression, and I don't know what happened, but I was seeing that. I went to mass there because my daughters did that to my wife. And I said, let me be a good example as a father. And then I got this advice to read this book by a guy named Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. And one of the things Dr. Peale said in his book was to write down positive Bible verses. Find 4 or 5 of them. And I did. 4:13, Philippians 4:13, is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I started reading these things and I started believing them. And then I really started, what is this Catholic stuff all about? Because I have these I don't know my faith, and I have my own perceptions of what it is. But let me find out what it's really about. And really what Catholicism is really all about is taking your focus off of me, myself, and I, and a pity party on me, myself, and I, and focusing on what you can do to serve someone else with a gift. 1 Peter 4:10 says, we have all been given gifts by the Lord that we are supposed to use to serve others. And I thought to myself, when I was going through this whole depression and trying to figure out what would be next, what gift do I have that I love that could help other people? And I started immediately thinking about my Labradors, but I was like, how do I help? And then this darn article I came across on the internet was the light bulb. And here I am 18 years later now. My wife and I did this on our own for 6 years on our own dime. I would go out training dogs. We'd breed a couple litters a year just to see if we were moving in the right direction. And by 2011, by 2010, we had so many organizations. I said, what are we going to do here, Sandy? Do we go on, or we become a nonprofit and try to do more? And I felt God calling me to do more. And I feel he's calling me to do it again. And so another struggle faces me, and that is figuring out, how do I get people to believe in what I do and show them the healing because we're kind of a business to business.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we donate the puppies to the organizations that see the end result. We don't really, but now that we're moving into the started for service dog, we will be so much closer to that. And we'll actually be closer to the end result. And the goal ultimately is to work with someone right here, Guy, in North Carolina, so that we can not only continue to provide puppies or started service dogs to our partners who need them, but in a pinch, if an organization needs a service dog like tomorrow, we'll have a couple around that are that close so they can fulfill that need. And that's who we want to be.
I'd love to keep in contact with you and bring you back and follow your incredible progression. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Charlie?
Sure. Directly, it's Charlie, CHARLIE, at project, 2, and the word heal, which like healing a wound, HEAL.org. That's project, 2, heal.org. They can call our office at 704-256-4056. In the Charlotte area, we do a lot of what we call mental health days, which are where we bring puppies. Since the pandemic, there's been a lot going on in the office place. We are invited in for an hour or two to offices with our puppies. The employees are like, this is the best day ever at work. If I had $1 for every time I heard that guy, I'd be a millionaire. People love the joy of seeing these 8-week-old puppies come in.
Yeah, they're so cute.
And I make them understand they're part of the process. You are now socializing a puppy, but you don't understand how much that means to this process. But you're making someone else's life better just by being here holding this puppy right now. Thank you.
Well, we'll have that linked up again at the show notes page.
Okay, great.
At the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Charlie, awesome, man. We'll be in touch.
Thanks for doing this podcast, Guy. We need people like you.
I appreciate that. Take care.
Have a wonderful weekend. Let's stay in touch, all right?
We will. Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye, Guy.